Welcome to Courageous Parenting Summit, transforming challenges into opportunities. I am Filza Jabeen, mother of three children, child psychologist, teen and parents transformational leadership coach.
Hi, I'm Edith Wallach, transformational leadership coach, Amazon best-selling author, and mother of three beautiful and clever children. Our vision is to empower parents and children by building connection with love.
Today we have here with us Dr. Mary Wilde. Welcome, Dr. Mary.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Mary Wilde is an integrative pediatrician and owner of Imagine Pediatrics Behavioral Health and Wellness in St. George, Utah. She uses a strength-based whole child approach to address emotional and behavioral issues in kids. Her main focus area is anxiety, ADHD, and parenting. So I would like to ask you this question. Being a pediatrician, how did you end up focusing on ADHD and anxiety?
Well, during my residency training, I remember learning about treatments for ADHD, and they didn't really set well completely with me because in the US, there's a lot of emphasis on jumping immediately to stimulant medications for ADHD, and I just it felt like this wasn't a healthy approach for children and that there was much more that could be done. And so that was the first thing that prompted me to focus on this and look for new and different ways to address ADHD. And then as one of my children got older, so I am a mom of 8 boys, and as my second son was getting older, I was realizing some tendencies of ADHD with him. And in the system, the school system that we were a part of, he really wasn't getting the support necessary, and he was getting in trouble, and he was, being asked to sit with his back against the wall during recess, and I knew that this was not right, and I just watched him sort of wilt as the year went along. And so eventually I took him out of that school and taught him at home for a while. Excuse me. And I really saw him kind of re-enlight, and it just made me see that we need to focus on children's strengths and give them skills and help them feel good about themselves rather than coming down hard on them and being punitive when they just are needing some new skills. So this was what led me into the ADHD route. And I feel that one of my jobs as a pediatrician is to help kids reach their full potential. And two big barriers that I see are when children feel anxious or when they are distracted and unable to focus. So these are the two areas that I've chosen to focus my time.
Okay, so thank you for letting us know about your own son. And how important do you think like parenting is in this part? Like we here in India, we are focusing always on hospitals and we are dependent on the therapists and doctors, but we are not, as a parents, we are not taking action. So how important do you think it is for us to take action?
I think it is so important because everything starts in the home, and we're like the frontline workers with our own kids. We're the ones who are spending time with our kids and creating the environment for them. And it's kind of a balance, because I never want any parent to feel like their child's behavior is their fault. We are all doing the best we can. However, there's so much power that we do have in creating an environment that can help our child succeed, and especially having positivity and some structure and taking accountability for the environment that we're creating, because ADHD, it does involve some inability to organize and structure. And so sometimes if we can create a little more of that at home, it can help our kids, have a framework to go by, and having boundaries, having consistency, and things like this. It just creates more structure, more order in a child who maybe struggles with those areas.
That's amazing. Can you explain a little bit about what is actually ADHD? Because many parents have no idea what it is and where to start.
Yes, so ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and really it's a descriptive diagnosis. So it's not like strep throat where you can do a test and be absolutely sure that there's, this factor there, but it's more of a descriptive diagnosis where you say, are these qualities present in this child? And one aspect is more an inattentive type, where a child is just very distractible, very daydreamy, and has a hard time focusing on the task at hand, and perhaps is a bit disorganized with materials and thoughts and needing a bit more structure. And that can be one aspect of ADHD. And then the other side of it, which can be co-occurring, is more the hyperactive side, where there's just constant movement and challenging of boundaries and lack of impulse control. And so, butting in, touching everything, wanting to learn in a very kinesthetic way. And these are all not negative qualities. Actually, a lot of these qualities can be positive. I love it that a child dreams and can be lost in their own thoughts. I love it that a child can be very creative and think outside the box, and that a child needs to move. Because so often in our modern society, we have taken away the opportunities to move, and our kids are telling us, no, this is not right. We need movement, we need to run, we need to play. And so sometimes it's just, we are actually putting a child in an environment that is a mismatch for their developmental level and just for what a healthy human needs. And so but yet there's a range of these qualities of this inattentiveness and hyperactivity. And so it can be problematic. It can be to an extreme level where it's truly getting in the way of a child's functioning and their learning and their relationships. And that's when we would go in and make a diagnosis of ADHD. But even a diagnosis of ADHD doesn't necessarily say that a child needs to be medicated or that there's something wrong with the child. It just means that a child perhaps needs additional skills or additional supports to help them thrive.
Okay. So as you mentioned the word diagnosis, we are always confused whether my child has ADHD or autism. So what would you say in that area? Because this is the most asked question in after I've started working with parents with ADHD and autism, whether my child has autism or ADHD. They are so confused. So how to rule out? How will a parent will come to know about ADHD?
Yes, so I think it can be confusing because a lot of times ADHD comes with other conditions. So a child can have this inattentiveness and hyperactivity, or you can have those separately, inattentiveness by itself or hyperactivity by itself. It can co-occur with other things like anxiety, or it can co-occur with sensory disorders where a child is very sound sensitive, light sensitive, or actually sensory seeking. And so that can confuse parents sometimes because those are overlapping characteristics with autism. But often with autism, you also see lack of social reciprocity, meaning, poor eye contact, poor connectedness in terms of communication. And so, you may see a parent who is trying to talk directly to a child, and the child doesn't make eye contact, doesn't make any recognition that the parent has spoken, and and that's very consistent. Whereas with ADHD, sometimes they're paying attention, sometimes they're not. They seem, sort of lost in their own thoughts, but yet they can engage. They can be reciprocal. They make eye contact with the parent. They have a back and forth conversation. They play peekaboo. They notice what a parent does and imitate and play. That would not be indicative of autism, yet a child could be doing those things, but also demonstrate distractibility. And so maybe, as even one would expect, like a 4 or 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, not always listening. So lack of compliance doesn't necessarily equal ADHD or autism. Sometimes it's the way we as parents are engaging with our kids, and sometimes it's just that they're kids and they're, playing with a toy and absorbed. So it's very important that we can identify what is normal versus what is pathologic, what is problematic. And for new parents, sometimes it's really hard to know because they don't have anything to compare it to. So the more exposure to your child, the more exposure you have to see how other children interact, then often you have a better basis for knowing whether this is normal, this is abnormal.
Thank you for that. And what would be your approach to support parents with children who have been diagnosed with ADHD? What would you say? Like, how would you start working with that parent?
Well, I really start with a strength-based, skill-based approach. So I start out by talking with the child and the parent about how there are many positive things connected with this description of ADHD. Sometimes, the diagnosis itself focuses on the negative aspects, but as with one of the authors in the US that I really love is Dr. Lara Hannes Webb, and she wrote the book The Gift of ADHD, and she talks about the gifts that are often associated with these traits. And just like when you pick up a stick from the ground, you can't just get one end of the stick, you get both ends of the stick. You get the strengths, you get the weaknesses, and some of the strengths that are associated with ADHD include creativity and exuberance and emotional sensitivity, which can be hard. It can be connected with a child who maybe has big emotions, but it also is often related to a child who is sensitive and notices other people's emotional states. Often it's connected with a connection to nature. So these are just a few of the qualities that often come with these other ADHD qualities that are beautiful and wonderful. And so how many of us could use some more energy and exuberance? I think that many of us could. And so I think it's important to look at both sides. So many children who leave my office with the diagnosis of ADHD, they're actually like proud and they're like cheering that they got this diagnosis because I focus on the positive aspects, the creativity, the energy. Then though, it's important to recognize that sometimes there are challenges and problems too, and those need to be addressed. And one author in the US that I really like, his name is Dr. Ross Greene. He wrote a book called The Explosive Child. And one thing he says in that book is that all behavioral problems in children are either due to lacking skills or unsolved problems. And so I think that we have to look back and say, what skills are missing, for this child? What do we still need to teach? And how can we patiently teach those things? Or is there a problem? Is there some problem with the environment? Or do we have a chaotic environment? Are we inconsistent with rules? Does our child spend way too much time on screens so they're not practicing these social interactions? Or you know, and also that's a dopamine issue when a child is spending tons of time on screens, getting all this dopamine activity in their brain, and then they don't have patience for mundane tasks. So there can be an underlying problem. And so we look specifically saying, you know, what is the problem? What is the missing skill? And then we try to address that. So, you know, number one would be a strength skill-based approach. Number two would be really looking for a balance between matched environments and mismatched environments. So the example I gave earlier with my son, he was in a very mismatched environment. He was in second grade. He was expected to sit very still, not ask questions, be very quiet, and that was not developmentally appropriate. And because he spent so much time in that mismatched environment, it started affecting his self-concept and his the way that he viewed himself and his confidence. And a matched environment would be, you know, taking him to the park, letting him run and play and or be out in nature. But yet if we spend all the time in a matched environment where we're not challenged to develop those skills of sitting, focusing, being quiet, then that's a problem too. So it's a balance between challenging our children to develop these new skills and yet giving them some time every day in these other environments that can help them feel free and alive and completely comfortable. So it's a balance of matched environments and mismatched environments. So accommodation and challenge. So that's number two. Number three is my integrative focus, my integrative approach. And when I say integrative approach, I mean one that looks at the whole child, one that addresses mind, body, and spirit. And so for looking at strategies of the mind, one example would be teaching and practicing skills of mindfulness, for example. That's just one thing. Mindfulness is an idea of training the mind to focus. And sometimes I think about it as like training a little puppy. You know, if you have a little pet puppy who you're trying to teach to walk in a straight line, they're going to be running to the right, running to the left, you know, pulling on the leash. And sometimes our mind is like that. It jumps here and there, and we can practice bringing it back to center, bringing it back to center. And maybe even with a very simple practice of focusing on breath or focusing on, you know, a meditation. So that's just one example of a intervention to do with the mind. And then with the body, maybe it would be looking at the nutrition. Is there anything missing? Do we have to, you know, take out dyes or processed foods? Or do we have to bring in better sleep? Or do we need to take more time for movement? Or, you know, could we introduce the practice of yoga? I love yoga because I feel like it teaches symbolically what we really want in terms of balance, discipline, distress tolerance. You know, sometimes we're in a pose and we really don't want to be in it, but we have to hold it. You know, it helps us develop some endurance and flexibility. You know, these are all characteristics that we would like to have, that we would like our child to have. And through the metaphor of the body, we can practice that in yoga. So those are some examples of body strategies or interventions. And then in terms of the spirit, there are things that bring us meaning and purpose and connection. So maybe for a child, it's being able to spend some time doing something that they love each day, like building Legos, or maybe it's spending time in nature and in the natural world, or maybe it's a religious practice like prayer that helps center our child and helps even our child seek a greater help for their challenge. So when we leave out a certain piece, for example, only going to a medication then we miss out on many of the aspects that can help our child's situation. So the last intervention would be an integrative approach that really brings in all these things.
Okay. So thank you for all the tips. I mean, all three of them were really big areas, which I think this is going to really help parents. So just one more question, which often comes up, like when should we start giving medicines to ADHD children? Like when is the red line we need to like immediately take action?
I think very rarely is it an emergency to start a medication for focus. I think times when I would consider moving more quickly to that, however, are if a child's behavior is so problematic that it is getting in the way of their learning, it's getting in the way of their relationships, it's impacting their own view of themselves because they're always struggling, getting in trouble, then I would think about it a little earlier. So it is partially related to the how extreme the behavior is and how it's impacting the rest of the child's experience. So I think that a lot of times, probably about half my patients do take medication as part of their whole plan, but it's not the only thing that we do. And often if we do medications, then we go slow and we start low. So I think that I try to find the least amount of medication that can be useful and start with other things when possible, because I think that creates more sustainable change. A medication does, for the time that it is active in a child's body, it helps, with the focus, but also it doesn't solve anything. It doesn't actually treat the condition. It just makes it easier for those hours to focus. And so the skills still need to be taught and practiced. And I also think that sometimes it can be a temporary thing that a child can maybe use a medication for a time as they're learning the skills and then try coming off the medication. It can be problematic though, because sometimes these tendencies towards inattentiveness or disorganization and things like that, sometimes they are lifelong challenges. And so sometimes it isn't just a temporary issue. Yet, as we try to build skills, we can help it be easier. Excuse me, I think I need a glass of water.
Okay. So you have this glass of water. And one more question from my side is, how do you think, how associated is parents' mental health with kids' behavior or kids' ADHD or mental health directly? How is it associated? How much? What is the percentage of it?
Yes, well, it's probably hard to give an exact percentage, but I would say that it is very, very related. And I say that not to make parents feel at cause or, feel like guilty for their own struggles, because we all struggle as parents. We all have things that we are learning, and the act of parenting is a big challenge, and so it tests us to our core. And so I think that it's just so important to invite parents to address their mental health issues and to get the support that they need so they can be at their best selves for this daunting and exciting and meaningful task of parenting.
Thank you so much. That is really helpful. And because this summit gets to impact a lot of parents, can you tell us a couple of tips for them so they can quickly shift and support their child?
I think the most important thing I would say is, aside from everything else, aside from whether your child has ADHD or not, or where they are on that line, whatever their struggles may be, I think it's important as parents that we try to look for the good. We try to see the good that our children are doing, because the things that we focus on grow. It's kind of like, do we water the plants or do we water the weeds? And yes, we have to address the problems, but we focus on what's good. We focus on what's going right. We focus on relationship, because without relationship, we have no influence. And so I think it's so important. It can be very challenging when we start seeing that there's a problem that exists, and we start focusing on that problem and start to feel distressed and discouraged. But there are always good things going on. There are always good moments that we can catch, our children behaving beautifully and just cherishing who they are as human beings and enjoying the process of parenting. It's very possible. It doesn't have to be a chore. It is one of the greatest gifts of life to be able to parent another person and have a family and walk together through this experience of life. So I would say looking for the good and focusing on that even as we address the challenges.
Okay, I really love the example which you gave, whether we want to water the plant or the weeds. So you surely have one free gift. Would you like to guide us to that? Because we are coming to an end.
Yes, I think that probably the best place to find me would be going to drmarywilde.com, and there is a gift there that is a masterclass for kids experiencing anxiety, but also if you want to email me, drmary@drmarywilde.com, I will send you a sheet of a list of different interventions you can do for ADHD, since that was the focus of our discussion today. So if you email me, I can send you that PDF, and then you can have some ideas to look through about ways that you can implement right away in addressing your child's ADHD or their possible ADHD if you haven't had them diagnosed.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And is that a gift also for young adults, or is it only for parents? Because I'm sure children will not be logging in.
Right. It's a gift really for parents. I think it's usually the parent who is
Supporting
the one who is utilizing and implementing mostly on behalf of the child. So it is more for the parent to review and make decisions from.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your presence on our summit, and looking forward to connecting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.